Right. All set.
This is Mike O'Grady with Legislative Council. I'm going to walk you through an amendment being proposed by Representative Graining from General Code S60. There was concern about the potential duplication of S60 with other state programs, including a program that House Commerce, which Representative Graining is the vice chair of, is working on now. So as part of the application for the assistance, the award under S60, a new subdivision 3 was added. So as part of the streamlined application developed by the Agency of Ag, there will be a list of any state grants or loans received in the past 5 years to include amount, source, and purposes of the funding received. This will inform the secretary and the review board regarding any award, but there is no disqualification or mandatory reduction in award. It is just an information collection provision. For some reason, Rep. Graining in her directive to me said she wanted it as sub 3, which required renumbering. So I just struck the entire subsection and did it this way.
Okay. So in other words, except for lines 11 and 12, everything else was already in.
Everything else is already in. I can do it so that you only see new language 11 and 12, but it will literally be maybe one line shorter and it will have no context.
Yeah, no, I think it's helpful to have the context.
Yeah.
Representative O'Brien.
Mike, what's the number of the VEDA bill or that the VEDA funding's in?
I don't know. I've heard that it got hung up in Senate Finance.
That was 2 days ago.
I was just wondering if sort of like our farm security fund, if that's a potential, funding thing going forward and it would have different amounts every year, or is it just a one-off of $2 million just
I
this?
don't think it's a one-off. But I do think that there was language in that bill that would have disqualified applicants who received other assistance. And I don't think finance took that well. And I don't know where that's the last update I got.
So that's a loan program, so
Right.
it might not need to be refunded every year. Those, if they could.
The way that VEDA runs their revolving funds, they're pretty expert at it by now. Sometimes they run low, but most of the time they've got it on a pretty self-sustaining basis.
All right. Mike, if you don't have anything else to add, we will have somebody from NOFA come up, I think, now and just.
Can I
A question?
Yeah, I do have a question. A list of any state grants. We have numerous grants for equipment. We went down here to Middlesex and saw where a state grant. I almost think instead of state grants, which to me is all encompassing and frankly not. It's comparing apples to rocks. And if they want to say something, any disaster money, maybe you've received in the past, but not grant money, because we all apply for different grants for different things. And to me, it's not.
Well, why don't we have NOFA come up?
Anyway,
Unless you've got a question for Mike, because I think NOFA may speak to that very point.
You want me to leave it up on the screen?
You mind? Can you stay?
That's fine.
Because it's linked to your device, I think, so. All right. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. For the record, Patty Kempner, NOFA Vermont. We are fine with this amendment, the way it's written. We'd support it, and we've looked at it and we're happy with it. That's basically all I want to say.
Okay. Just as far as Representative Nelson's point earlier, having the language be as it is, that would provide the secretary with not just relief funding, but any grant, working lands grant, for example. Does that, from your perspective, serve a purpose?
I mean, my impression of where this amendment came from is that it is seeking to be gathering information about other investments that the farm in question or the forestry operation has benefited from. That seems to be the intent. And to me, to us, that information is fine for the secretary and the review board to have in making their consideration of awards. We haven't considered, any other version of this, so.
Yeah. Representative Burt, you had a hand up a moment ago.
I agree with what Richard was saying, that I'm a little surprised, I guess, because like you can get a grant for getting a greenhouse put up, but that really has nothing to do with a disaster coming along, taking the greenhouse out. So I'm surprised that we kind of want to add this to this, given that the more information that they have to process on these applications, the slower that that the funds are going to go out. And we're trying to keep it a expedited process, and it just seems unnecessary to me. I can see a list of any state funding for disaster related things, but I don't understand why they want it on, especially on loans and things of that nature. For 5 years seems a little bit. It's going back a ways. I just don't understand. It seems to me, I could totally see not want to double fund the same disaster. And maybe seeing what, other funding that they received for other disasters, maybe going back 2, possibly 3, but going back 5 years on any grant or loan seems like it's going to slow down the process unnecessarily.
Burns. Wicked person.
And Randy, I wondered, as far as you see the farm security fund, is it incumbent that applicants are transparent in what they've received, whether it's federal or state or say NOFA's emergency philanthropic sort of side of things, or even commercial loans? Do they have to put that in a spreadsheet when they apply?
No, not as the bill is currently written. I mean, this amendment is the first
Right.
edition of the gathering of that kind of information, which in the amendment is limited to state grants and loans. It wouldn't, to my reading, address federal funding or philanthropic funding.
Representative Boston.
Yeah, when I spoke with Representative Granning about the bill, my impression was she was concerned about two things. One, about people, what she called double dipping, getting paid twice for the same disaster. So you have a flood and you get $20,000 from the emergency fund and you get $20,000 from something else. And it's exactly the same money getting paid twice. So she didn't want that to happen. That was one concern. And this would address that. But the other thing was she didn't want somebody, say, who lives in a floodplain to keep planting in the same floodplain and getting flooded every year and then getting bailed out every year.
The business plan, yeah.
Right. And so her original language included things like, you wouldn't get granted in multiple years unless you had engaged in mitigation for what you had received the previous grant for. And this is more general, but she was okay with this version. But I actually kind of wonder if we asked her about changing it to say, related to emergency relief. I don't think she would have a problem with that, because honestly, it feels pretty extraneous to say, hey, I got a grant to install an irrigation system or a greenhouse or whatever, many things people could get grants for. Like, that's not relevant. I think we maybe should check with her about that, which unfortunately would mean it's going to delay when we can vote on it. Or maybe we want to do it and then see if she wants to.
I would say this is not our amendment. This is Representative Granning's amendment. So we can
We can amend her amendment.
probably not Yeah, probably not the way we would want to move things forward. So I would say that what we could do is we can pause here unless anybody has anything else they want to add. And we can maybe see if Representative Branning wants to come in and speak to it again too.
I mean,
Go ahead.
I mean, as it's written, right, it could be my kid got a VSAC grant and from the state, and I need to put that down.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Chair. So Grady indicated that we could offer an alternative. And alternative language.
You have options, I think working with the sponsor first is the normal procedure. You pick Boston, right? Yeah.
I just want to,
Council offer a possible language that we might propose.
I think he would need to speak directly to the sponsor and shouldn't be speculating. But I do want to just confirm again, since we still have Maddie from NOFA in the witness seat, that the coalition of farmers who asked us to draft this bill are comfortable with that, with the language in the amendment.
Well, I will be clear that I've spoken with one other coalition partner about this language who was supportive. I do think it's important, and maybe this is just a question for Ledge Council, that it's clear that it would be limited to the farm business, not to something like what you said, a VSAC grant. I think being clear about the scope is really important. Yeah, but in the interest of information that the legislature wants, if you all think this is important, then we'd be fine with it.
All right. Thank you, Maddie.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, good. Well, why don't we